And welcome to Marker Mayhem. I think this is class 6, but I could be wrong. This is the water soluble marker class, so I think that's number 6. We're going to be using a variety of markers, and I'm going to say that the largest portion of the markers that I like to use for this particular, portion or type of marker art is the Crayola brand. But I do have a variety of brands here. So first thing is the typical Crayola marker is just a fat kind of a barrel tip. These are a little bit old, so the tip is worn down a bit. Some of my other brands and colors might be a little bit newer, but this is just the typical washable Crayola Kids brand marker. And I have a full set of these. I think there's 8 colors in this set, but I can't remember. There might be more. I think standard, the basic boxes that you get, the Crayola markers, they're usually sets of 8. So that's the typical Crayola marker. Then I do also have this Crayola marker set of gel markers. Now what's really awesome about these markers, and I kind of knew right away something was a little bit different with them when I saw that they came with a white version. So I knew something was a little bit different. These are awesome to use on dark paper, or over dark paint. So like if you've got some black paper, let's see what you can see. You can kind of see this area down here. So I'm going to put this marker down, and at first it looks almost clear. It has to dry, and as it dries it becomes more opaque, and they remind me a lot of what are those markers called? The permapakes. They remind me a lot of the permapakes in the respect that they're slightly opaque, but they're not fully as opaque as, say, a poster paint. They're somewhere in between. I don't know if you can see, it's starting to lighten up here, down here where I put a little bit of that white down. But these are really amazing to use on dark paper. They're also nice to use over top of or mixed in with the standard regular Crayola markers. But they are a gel marker, they are washable, they're otherwise, pretty much they operate the same as the regular Crayola markers do, with the exception that they are slightly opaque. Then I have just a very off brand called Crazy Art. These are just even cheaper, which, Crayola is very cheap, but these are even cheaper than Crayola. I picked up this set mainly because they had all the neon colors. Since then, I did find an 8-pack of Crayola neon markers, but I actually gave them to my granddaughter because her and my daughter were playing one day, and those seemed to be the ones that my granddaughter Madison liked the most, so I gave her that 8-pack. But I have this pack, which is just an off-brand. They work exactly the same way. And then, in fact, I have another off-brand. This is such an off-brand. It's from the dollar store that doesn't even have a brand name or any labeling on the on the individual marker itself. These are just a water-soluble marker that is just a really generic brand. So you can see it just has a much smaller little bullet tip. The newer, the Crazy Art has really pretty much similar to the same tip as the Crayola. And then a newer Crayola tip that's not as worn down looks like this. So that purple one that I showed you was really worn down compared to the point on this one. But they last for a really long time, and they're really fun to play with. As well, for this particular face, if I want to add highlighting back in, I try to preserve the highlighted or light areas, but if I want to add highlights back in, I use either I have the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen in white, which is number 101. This is the big brush pen. However, unlike their regular pens last for an extremely long time, in my opinion. But this particular pen doesn't appear to have lasted as long. I mean, I have Pitt pens that I've had since like 2008 or 2009, and they still work and they still have plenty of fluid in them. But this, mind you, I've used it a lot, but not as much as I would have expected. It has already begun to kind of run out. I also always use Sharpie poster paint. Now, this is not the oil paint. This is the water-based paint. You can tell the difference. The water-based paint has a blue strip. When they're oil-based paints, they have a red strip, generally. That's how I can usually quickly pick them, tell them apart. Also, the oil, this is a plastic barrel, and the oil paints tend to come in a metal barrel. They otherwise look very similar, though, so you can easily get confused as to which one you're working with. I have mine separated so I don't get them confused. But you can usually tell from the difference with the end of it whether it's blue or red. So I use these interchangeably. I've also been known to use the Permapaque white. The Permapaque white and the Faber-Castell white are, in my opinion, very similar to the same basic marker as far as the effect that you get. Obviously, there are different types of ink. It's not, this is about the ink to a point, but it's also just about the effect that you can get from them at this point for using it for highlighting. So these two, I would say, are very comparable. So if you have either one, I know a lot of people hate on this marker because they expect it to be as opaque as, say, a Sharpie poster paint marker. But when it comes to wanting to be able to build up layers and translucency, that's actually a pretty awesome marker because it's not completely opaque, but it has more opacity. Well, there are no, non-opaque white markers anyway. So it's kind of, it's, I guess, would be the non-opaque white marker would kind of be what these are. So when I see people hating on them, I laugh because I feel like they're not looking at the product for what it is. They're looking at the product for how it's branded and sold. If I was a company who was producing either of these two markers, I'd be selling them on the fact that they are a transparent, opaque white marker or a transparent white marker instead of trying to sell them like this one. Anyway, so those are the different markers that we're going to use. I have provided you with a printable template that you can print off. Now, I have printed this onto a really thin Bristol vellum. You can use any thin cardstock. The Bristol vellum has a smoother and a harder paper surface. It's not as absorbent as some regular cardstocks are, so it almost feels kind of silky smooth when you run your hand over it, almost as if it was like a satin type of finish. That's kind of what the Bristol vellum has. That's the reason that I like to use it when I'm working with markers. However, you can use any type of paper because we're actually going to put a layer of either matte medium. You can use a matte medium. You can use Collage Podge or any type of collage medium. You can use a glossy polymer medium. You can use any brand like the Liquitex or the Golden, whatever. This is just what I have on hand. And what we're doing, the reason that we're doing this is simply because we want to create a non-porous surface to work on. So we want a surface that isn't going to be as likely for the marker to soak into it, and instead it's going to be more likely that the marker is going to float across the surface a lot easier. I generally tend to put anything down like matte medium or polymer, any type of a varnish or surface prep type of product like this, not gesso, but everything else. I tend to put down with just a very soft bristled brush. I tend to stay away from things like a foam brush because those brushes tend to create little bubbles, and I don't want little bubbles. And I'm just going to put a layer of this over the surface and allow it to dry. So I'm kind of like pre-prepping before we get started. If you are printing out your template, I printed mine with a laser inkjet printer. So because of that, it tends to not want to, it doesn't tend to bleed if I put something wet over it. However, if you're using, like, say, a standard inkjet printer and you're concerned about bleeding, I recommend using a fixative, a spray fixative. Or if you don't have a spray fixative, then you can use, I've got a little hair here, I need to work it out of it. If you don't have a spray fixative, you can use a clear matte spray paint. They do sell them. I use the version from Krylon. You can also, in a pinch, use an unscented cheap hairspray. In America, I tend to buy Aquanet, the cheapest Aquanet you can get that is unscented. However, that's not professional grade by any means, and I don't recommend it if you're doing an actual painting. Now, because I am lucky enough to have a printer that it's not going to bleed, I was able to just print it out and then just brush on some matte medium. And like I said, you can use a satin or a gloss if that's what you have. Whatever you have that is going to give you a clear, non-porous surface to work with. Also, I will say that I very often use these markers in my journal over top of acrylic paint. So by that, what I mean is that a lot of the time I will be drawing and painting and using inks like distress inks and things like that. And then I'll have an area that I just kind of feel like doodling a face in, and so I'll draw a face in, whether I'm drawing it with graphite pencil or ballpoint pen, even different types of jelly roll pens. But once I have that face there, because I have other stuff in the background, I usually just want to sort of build up the layers of the face. That was where I originally, started using these water-soluble markers, was because I was not at home, so I didn't have access to, water and a sink and all of that for acrylic paints. I tend to do that type of stuff when I'm sitting in the car or sitting waiting for something, or I'm, hanging out with other people. And so I really just have like my markers and my pens and stuff with me. So that was why I started down this road to begin with, was because I didn't have the convenience of acrylic paints, and I didn't want to use watercolor paints because I'd already painted the surface of the paper. So if you are using them in that way, they're really awesome in that way. You don't have to have a clean, face or a white background and then you build from there. You can do this over top of any type of paper design. You can even use like pattern paper, pattern scrapbooking paper. Just remember that you're going to have to build up layers, and at some point you're going to have to bring whites back in if you do it that way. And that's where the white markers really come in. So you can take a fully painted piece of paper and go over it with the white marker, let that dry, and then use these markers over it. So keep that in mind. Now, I use my fingers for this. I can't really explain it, but oftentimes when I'm painting things like this, I find using my fingers is just comes more naturally than using a brush and then trying to use water. I really just I think it has something to do with the fact that I'm putting the color down with the marker. Maybe partly why I like it that way. I'm not sure. And you can use any color scheme that you want to, because the Crayola markers really kind of just come in the 8 colors, and because I don't expect anyone to go out and buy some exorbitant 32 pack of fancy markers just so they can play around with these faces for learning purposes. Now, if you find that you love making these and that you prefer creating with marker instead of, say for instance, watercolor or acrylic paint or oil paint, then by all means, go buy a fancy expensive set. But for the purposes of this class, I'm just going to use my fingers, and I'm just going to use a variety out of these different packs of colors, which means these are not going to have a lot of flesh tints. They're going to have pinks and oranges and yellows, and that's how I'm going to kind of, get some flesh tone colors. But honestly, I'm not even going to worry about using colors that are skin toned. I'm going to just go crazy and just make shadows and just play with whatever colors I have at hand. And I just want to hit this really quickly with a heat gun and make sure it's dry 100% before I get started. So I'm going to pause and do that, and I apologize. I am having a huge allergy attack right now. We have a lot of rain that just moved through, a weather front, and I made the mistake. It's always a choice. Do I take the lighter over-the-counter allergy meds, or do I take the doctor-prescribed stronger ones? And I always seem to be lately making the wrong choice. So I have taken the lighter over-the-counter ones, and they're not working. So my eyes are itchy, watery. They want to close. I keep sneezing and sniffling and coughing. It's, bear with me. It's annoying. I realize that. All right, I'm going to get this dry, and I'll come back. Alright, as you can see, I tend to just throw my markers into a box, and they're supposed to be well organized. So these and this neon one, shouldn't actually be in here, but I have so many that I just toss them into boxes, and I have a ton of different boxes that I keep them in. So bear with me. Hopefully I won't grab out one that I'm not supposed to be teaching with, right? Now, I tend to start with the neon colors first because they're the most transparent, and then I just kind of work my way from there. I'm going to do a pretty, if you've taken a lot of these Marker Mayhem classes, then you kind of probably already have the idea that in truth, I'm sort of doing the same thing with all of the different markers up to a certain point. And then the properties of that particular type of marker is what I've been trying to highlight with each of these classes. In the case of these markers, the thing that is, to me, what makes them kind of stand out but still similar to the other markers is that they are completely transparent. They are very water soluble. I will just, to give you a quick example, when I say they are very water soluble, is that, I'm going to sneeze. I do apologize. I know that this is gonna, if I don't keep recording, then you're gonna miss out on your class, or the class is gonna be late, so I have to record. But yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm trying to find, I have a gray, I'm pretty sure, in the regular Crayolas. I might just pull all of the ones out that I'm going to use today, because I really do have a mix of other markers in here that I didn't realize I had so many other ones. This is the one I'm actually looking for. But let me go ahead and pull the rest out so that we have them all. Whoops, I just threw one on the ground. The colors do not always run true to their caps and containers, and that's something to keep in mind. If you're if you haven't used them a lot, if you're new to using them, or if you've never used them and thought of them as, materials for creating faces. So all of those were not supposed to be in there. So if you're not used to using them for creating faces, then you might want to pre-test, especially if you are the type of person who will get kind of, off, if it'll throw you off, so to speak, when you're trying to create. If you get an wildly unexpected result, then I would say pre-test. By pre-testing, I mean take a blank piece of paper and mark out each color. For me, and I've done this since I was a little kid, nothing changes. Some things never change, I guess is the way I should say that. As a kid, when I wanted to do, and I did a lot of drawing in journals with markers. I did not, art journal, or I didn't actually, write when I was doing it, so I didn't combine the two. I've always kept a written journal, or when I was younger, it was a diary. Yes, I had the traditional pink girl's diary with the little lock and the little tiny key. I've always kept one, and but I did keep separate sketchbooks where I did a lot of marker art. My daughter actually has, some of those that she considers keepsakes, and that she actually started drawing because she found my old sketchbooks when she was a kid, and that got her interested. But anyway, I would, and still do to this day, mark, so I would mark a swatch and then lay the marker down, mark another swatch and lay it down, and I would have them so that they were in order, and I would keep them in that order as I worked. Probably something in there about my OCD made that work for me, and satisfied that OCD part of me. But if you're not sure about your colors, that's an awesome way to kind of keep track of them as you go, and not, be confronted with a surprise that throws your creative muse wildly off. But I'm just going to take a damp brush, and I'm just going to put some of this gray out. I'm kind of like saying this is like background color, I guess. But I'm going to put this gray out, and I'm going to show you that first off, the reason that we put this layer down is because while it's still wet, I can take my finger and I can manipulate that marker, which makes it really awesome for painting faces. And because you can, manipulate it to the point of, causing it to kind of gradiate and, fade out, it's great for shading of faces. However, it's also really awesome with a wet brush. So I dipped my brush into water, and now I'm just going to paint with the marker. Now, we'll talk here in a second about what just happened there, because something definitely is going on there. What's happening here is when I painted the matte medium on, I was only concerned with covering the entire face or the skin tone. I didn't worry about covering all of the paper. So what you're getting here, what you're seeing here, is where it's raw paper, and immediately, even with water, as soon as the color touches it, it soaks right in. So that's what that is that is, a place where there wasn't any medium. So there is medium here, and there is medium here, but there isn't in these two places here. And here there is, but it's like thin. Here there was none at all whatsoever. That's why it's super dark right there. And because that's probably where I was direct to marker to paper. So that's something to keep in mind if you're doing these and you don't want, I call these happy resists. If you don't want any happy resists to show up, then you need to make absolutely certain you cover every inch of the surface. In fact, I would recommend you do the matte medium process twice. Once go over everything with one orientation, then reorient the paper and go over it again, and that way you won't have any happy resists that'll happen. I personally love everything grunge and messy and unusual, so for me that's a happy resist. I'm happy that it's there, love it, seek it out most often. But you can see how with just a little bit of water we were able to really move that color around. So that's why I say that they work extremely well with water. In fact, at one point before I decided I wanted to I work heavily with watercolors now, right now anyway, and these markers and the fact that they work so well, I used to like jokingly refer to them as watercolor in marker form, because you could actually just take a set of these and a water brush and be able to create watercolor without, you know, any of the hassle. Now, of course, there are other products, so I won't go down that road, but they work really well for that. However, I like to just simply, you know, get them down on paper. That's, you know, the most fun for me. I'm actually going to start with I think I'm going to start with a yellow. Let's see. This is the yellow that comes with the Crayola. This is the off-brand yellow. This is the neon yellow. And then this is like a orangey yellow, a golden color, which probably would be equivalent to an orange. And I haven't tested it out, but I think it's probably more orangey. But anyway, I'm going to start with the neon because those colors are the most translucent. And something to keep in mind is once you start blending with marker, it'll probably stain your finger. And I apologize to any of you who didn't realize the unintended finger staining that happens. And you can wear gloves, latex gloves or something, if you don't want to get your fingers stained. But you do have to stop and rinse color off as you go off of your fingers, because otherwise this dark that I have on here, even though it's dry now, these are water soluble, so it will re-wet. And you know, with the Pitt pens, for instance, the India ink, once you let those fully dry, they don't tend to lift as much. But with these, because most of them are washable, or they're, you know, water-based, non-toxic, they will what do I want to call it? Reactivate, I guess. I want to say reignite. They will reactivate with any, you know, small amount of water. And it's the allergy medicine talking, no? There's no real excuse. So in order to deal with that, I usually have a container of baby wipes. I buy just like the really cheap ones that I can, you know, find at the dollar store or the discount store, and keep them hanging around in my studio. Now, I use these a lot for all types of things, and I try to always buy the ones that are hypoallergenic, alcohol-free, and unscented whenever possible. But I will, you know, I mean, I'll take what I can get because I can't always find that. So something to keep in mind, I just get a baby wipe out and I just kind of keep it handy, and every so often I stop and I try to remove that color. Now, you're not going to necessarily remove all of it, and I'll show you why, because it stains. So that's after I've washed it with the baby wipe. So it does indeed stain, and keep in mind that using the baby wipe, you're removing the barrier cream. You know what I mean? So like it's a catch-22. But if you have that dark color on there and you go to spread out, say this yellow, for instance, you'll be mixing the two. And then you might get unexpected results. Okay, so I start out I just want to kind of build up my shadows as I go. And I'm going to start with kind of trying to say that this is like my basic flesh tone. So I'm going to start where all my shadows are. And this particular drawing that I have provided, if you guys are using the template, then it's actually already has some shading from the pencil work. And that can be nice to get started with, especially if you're new to shading faces. So that's why I could have whited out all of the shading and given you just the bare bones drawing. But I thought I would keep just a hint of the shading so that you could have somewhat of an idea. So I start out by putting some color down in all the places that I would traditionally shade a face. I always shade all the way around my faces, and the reason for that is because when I first started doing painting faces, and I wanted to really kind of try for something that was a little bit more realistic, like I had an artist who had a lot of experience painting. Look at my paintings and tell me, you know, why did they not look as realistic as I had imagined them to? What was I, you know, missing? Because I knew I was missing something. I knew they didn't feel finished. And she was kind enough to look at it and come back and say, well, the problem is that you didn't finish the detailing out. You didn't take it far enough. And you hear a lot of people talk about overworking a painting, and so I always thought that I was leaving a lot of stuff out or not going far enough, and that was a good thing. But it turned out that you do have to push a little further into trying to get a little bit more of a realistic feel. You have to push a little further, and by pushing a little further, one of the things that I did to kind of fix that, and the advice that she had given me, was that if I went through and I rounded out the face, shaded it so that it had more of a 3D effect or appearance, that would, you know, help to flesh out the faces a little bit more. So keep that kind of like, you know, in mind as you go along. If you're holding back, or if you feel like you're not quite there, it may be that you need to go a little further. I've moved now just to the regular yellow from the Crayola colors, and I'm just going to do the next level in my mind of shading. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to try to finish one thing. Basically, that was why I go all the way around the face, was because that was one of the things that I added after I received her critique, and it really was beneficial for me to add that and to learn that kind of lesson. So that's the reason why you'll always see me do a little bit of that. So now what I've done was, with the neon yellow, I kind of started building all my shadows. Now I'm using this medium sort of yellow, and I'm going into those shadows, and everywhere that I kind of want it to be just a little bit darker, I'm sort of adding in this medium yellow, and you can see that every time I add it in, I don't go all the way to the outer edge of the fluorescent yellow. I sort of let that fluorescent yellow stay to the outside of it, so that it kind of has a gradiated effect. Now, there are some places where you're going to want more of that gradiated effect, and some places where you're going to want less. And there are some places where you're going to want shadows that are different from, they're more irregular from the shadows that you created. So like those two shadows that I created there, they don't have any of the gradation because there was none of that original yellow. And you know what I'm going to do? Instead of constantly holding this up, you don't need to see this much of my desktop anyway. I'm going to pull this down. I do this manually, so beware, there will be some shaking. But maybe this will be helpful. You can see a little better, I hope. Alright, so now I'm going to go to what looks kind of like an orangey color. I'm not sure. Let's find out what we get. When I'm not sure, I start with a place that I know should be really dark anyway. So if it's like a wildly off color, it'll be okay. It's you know, it is definitely not really orangey. It's more golden. I mean, it probably is orange if it's not over top of this already kind of gold color. But this works great. It's just going to help darken up some of the areas that I might want to have a little darker. Now, I haven't done any blending so far with this, but I kind of do feel like with the addition of this color that maybe I want to do a little bit of blending. So I'm just going to give that a go and see what happens. So like down here, I'm going to put the color down, and then I'm just going to kind of soften. I have to re-wet, so that's something else to talk about. They do dry. Like the yellow has kind of dried in place, the fluorescent yellow. So if you want to be able to blend that color after it's dry, you have to re-wet it with something. I usually re-wet it with this with marker instead of using water for the most part. But you can obviously use water to re-wet it if you want to for blending purposes. You can see how it blends so nice and soft. The marker does together and on the surface of the paper, which is really predominantly because we put a previous layer down. I'm going to hold that up and just kind of give you a little bit of a close-up. See how well it all blended out? I mean, in some places I didn't blend it on purpose yet. So like right here, I haven't blended anything there. But using that as an example, I'm going to go back to that neon marker. And again, like I said, if you want to blend it once it's already dry, you just add more marker, and that will get it moving. So that's kind of what I did right there, was I just added more marker. And I'm just using that new marker to blend these areas a little bit more. You can also use a lighter marker in the same color family to blend a dark color that you put down and let dry. It also does work in that way as well. Just going to do a little bit more. I'm just kind of blending the yellows still here. And sniffling, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do about these allergies, and they are the bane of my existence because I have them severely, and probably especially because I live in Florida, where we have mostly, the weather's always kind of summertime. So I have them, it seems like more often or all the time. And that's just because it's always summer-like here. Okay, so now I'm going to try to get some of that color off of my fingertips. And I want to work in her lips and her eyes really quickly for a bit. So, oh, the sniffling. I want to find the gel blue, which I think is this one. Yeah, so this is the one that's going to be like a semi-opaque. And then this is just like a basic blue, light blue. So I'm going to do her eyes with kind of this basic light blue. And I just kind of paint in the entire eye area. And this is very typical of me, very standard of my style. I like to teach what is my real style as well sometimes. Now I'm going to take this one that is a gel pen or gel marker, and I'm just going to go back and forth and add like a little swatch down in the lower portion of the eye. And my goal for doing that is hopefully it will lighten, and thus it will look like the reflected light from light that was filling the eye. We'll see as it dries whether it does that or not. In the meantime, I want to work with the lips, and I have this sort of lip fleshy pink in the gel marker. I have a pink here, don't have any idea what that really looks like. And then I have this pink in just the regular, oh no, that's a gel too. Yeah, those are both gels. So I should have, I thought I had a pink in the regular, but maybe not. Maybe we don't get a, there isn't a pink. Oh yeah, here it is. My goodness. Okay, so that's just the regular Crayola pink. So I'm going to actually start with that one. And I'm going to paint the entire upper lip with it. I'm going to come down at the center into the lower lip. And then I'm going to outline the lower lip just a bit with that color. Now I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to take the orangey pinky gel, and I'm kind of going inside of all of that with it. Then I'm going to take this basic one. I don't know, I'm hoping this is a darker pink. It's not really darker, not much. So we're probably would have to stick with that, except I'm lucky and I have a neon. So I'm going to use that neon. Well, this is more like a purpley pink. Let's see how dark that one is. Well, nothing is dark enough today. It's just not my day. All right, I'm going to go with a red. This is just a real traditional red. And you can hardly see the difference. I'm striking out all over the place. Okay, this one you can at least tell that there's more than one color there. So I'm going to just use this to just darken up a little bit those different areas. And now I'm finally going to pull out the white gel, and I'm going to go around that entire center highlight that I left in that lip, and I'm going to fill it with this color, but I'm going to use this to kind of blend the pinky orangey color that I originally put down. So I'll show you this in just a moment up close. So you can see that you get like a variegated color there. It's not a solid pink. And then we'll just need to let that dry to see how that looks. Now, because I'm using this gel marker and I've gone over that pink color, I'm going to just clean the end of it off on the baby wipe at first, and then on my dry paint rag. I just want to try to get that orange out of it as much as possible, and then I'll set it aside and hopefully it will fill back up with more ink. Let's see, I can see that that blue isn't really lightening up so far anyway, as much as I had hoped it would. I might have to make some changes to that. Now, for the skin, I kind of want to push into some more orange, and I'm going to start with this fluorescent neon orange. And I'm just going to, again, work in the shadows, but I'm going to try to work in the cooler shadows, so, or the lighter, well, the warmer shadows, the shadows that are naturally created on the face, but they're not actually like cast shadows. So they're not like parts of the face that are in shadow. They're parts of the face that the sunshine or the light is still hitting. They're just darker. Generally caused by bone structure, thickness of skin, skin pigmentation, that type of thing, but not caused by actually being cast into shadow. So I'm just going to add the orange where I kind of want it, but I'm doing this with the intent of blending. So I'm going to blend all of it, and I know that in advance. So I know that I can put it down in like a weird scribble or just a little dash, because I know I'm going to blend it out. Lately, I'm very much into all of the girls that I draw having kind of, you know, circles or lines or color under their eyes. That's my new thing. I don't know about everyone else, but I kind of go through phases where I have like some new thing I'm playing with conceptually. So that's just kind of what you're seeing there. So you can see that, I mean, I can just make like a line, and as long as I don't leave it, and as long as I keep working with it, I can completely blend a line out. I just kind of put the color down in the approximate area that I think I'm going to want it, and then I blend from there. It is definitely a learned skill, being comfortable with and knowing kind of where you want to put color and how you want to manipulate it. Keep in mind that just like with different size brushes, you have different sized tips to your fingers, so you can get smaller, spread out smaller things with a smaller fingertip, just like, just in case you're not thinking of it that way. I think of it that way, but I've been doing this for a while. So, but not everyone looks at their fingers and thinks of brushes. So, and I'm not going to do as much over here, and my reason for that is because over here, this side, the shadows that you're going to see are typically going to have been in part caused by cast shadow. So instead of doing a really warm color on those, I think it's better to do a lighter color, my gosh, my brain is not working properly, to do a cooler color. So for cooler colors, you can use greens and blues often interchangeably in cooler areas. So I'm going to go ahead and stop, and I'm going to rinse, not rinse, but use the baby wipe to try to get some of that color off my fingertips. Usually, as often as I wash my hands, as someone who does a lot of painting, I wash my hands quite a lot. So by the end of the day today, or at most by tomorrow, you'll barely be able to even see a hint of ink on my fingers. So that's something to keep in mind. My tea has gone cold, and I kind of want to give all of this a chance to sort of set a little bit by letting it kind of dry. It doesn't really set, but it won't be as wet when I start working with the cooler colors. So I'm going to kind of take a break. To you, it'll just be like I turn the camera on and off, but to me, I'm going to go heat up some more tea, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Everything's had a little bit of a chance to get set. I'm just fixing my chair here. I'm a little off today. Okay, so now I want to work with the cooler colors, and I'm going to kind of play with the brighter neon colors to start out with, and sort of see how we do with that. The only part on this side that I really kind of want to be sort of dark is the above this eyelid here. So I'm going to put a combination of the colors in there, so you'll see me do that, and I just want to kind of explain that. So I'm going to do that over here. Quite a lot of the green at this point to get us started. And you can see that, it obviously is going to give it a darker tone than the other side of the face as well. You get more depth from it that way, but then it definitely also gives you sort of that impression that this side is not as light. And I'm going to get a little bit crazy with it here because it really should be pretty heavily shadowed. So I'm going to actually switch over and add in some blue, and this blue pushes a little to the aqua anyway, and then by layering it over top of yellows and the green, it's definitely going to have a little more of an aqua flare at this point. So now I'm just going to kind of smooth everything out. Because I worked pretty quickly, and because I already have several layers of not really oily, but wet marker, and here I've got like a little too much marker, so I'm just going to wipe my finger off, and then that way I have a little less marker on my finger now. It's kind of like having a little less paint. If you get color into the you know, the outside background, away from the skin. That's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to be painting our background. Now here, my finger's like a little too big and it's getting everywhere, so I can go down to a smaller finger size. If you get color where you don't want it, so I got a little too much here, that's when you can come in with a damp, not really soaking wet, but a damp brush and sort of remove color. That's another reason why I really love these. As long as you don't let it sit for too long and give it a chance to stain the surface. That's the one thing. And you do have to be careful not to remove too much, because every layer is still going to be able to be manipulated. Now I'm going to go to a different blue. It kind of looks pretty similar in this case, but it does have a little more depth to it. So now you sort of start kind of getting that feel that this side is a little darker. I'm actually going to encourage that a little more by going a little bit larger with the darker shading. And by that, what I mean is I'm going to come down onto this cheek a little more. And that way I'm kind of throwing the face a little more into shadow than it was before by doing this. Hopefully this is all making sense to you as we go. So I really kind of threw that, you know, portion side of the face into more shadow. And every so often I just kind of stop and just sort of take a look at it visually and see whether or not I feel like I'm achieving my, you know, expected result by doing so with the colors, you know. So I kind of stop and go, okay, how do I feel like I'm doing? And I feel like it's, you know, it's looking pretty good, but it would be nice to have a little bit of warmth still over there so that it doesn't look too alien. Not that I mind if it looks alien, I don't. Personally, but you can see how the blue really stains. The blue and the green stain a lot more because I've washed that with the baby wipe and everything. But like I said, it's not permanent. I'm going to use the pinky orange color to start with, and I'm just going to very quickly put some color down and move it around because I don't want to completely obliterate the greens and blues that I have. I just want to get a little bit of warmth in, and it's good because it helps to deepen what I've already got on here. So, and that color is just kind of a little too dark, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to go to this like golden orangey color that I was using. Whoops. I do have a hard time sometimes hanging on to my markers. I tend to throw them around a little bit. Now you can easily make mud when you do this. However, keep in mind that skin tone is kind of muddy. And what I mean by that is your skin has just about every color occurring in it naturally. So if you get your colors a little muddy when you're mixing, it's not going to hurt anything because those colors are present probably in somewhere in your skin anyway. That's kind of a hard concept to talk about or to explain, but now I didn't end up getting the whites that I had hoped, the light that I had hoped for here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go in with the pen, and I'm just going to add some white. And then now typically if I were using like the Sharpie poster paint, I would probably go ahead and dab at that to lift it. I'll show it. I'll hold it up close so you can see what I have. But because this one's a lot more transparent, this white is, I'm going to leave it like that. And again, just like I did before, I'm going to kind of try to get that blue back off of the tip of that marker. So that's done. I did that. And then I kind of want to get some color in her cheeks. And I have a variety of options of things I can use. This is a fluorescent red, which kind of looks like an orange basically. It's like a darker orange, and I'm just going to put a little bit on here, and then I'm going to quickly sort of blend it out. I'm going to do that again here, and again I'm just going to really, really blend. More conscious of the blending than I was previously with the other things that I did. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this color into her eyes, because if you go and you look in the mirror right now, you're going to see that you actually see a lot of red, a lot of pink skin in the eyes if you go look at them. All of that skin that makes up the eye socket has a ruddy red pink tone to it. So that's why I'm putting a lot of that pink into her eyes, and I'll just give you a little bit of a close-up of what I did there. Focus, focus. But now I'm actually going to go to the regular gray, not the gel gray, just the regular gray. And I'm going to put some shading into her eyes, and I'm going to use a combination of that gray and then the black that comes with the regular Crayola. And I don't know if you have spent any time experimenting at all yet with these markers, but something that I find interesting is this is the black that comes with the Crayolas. And if you take that black and you put it down and you separate it out, what color is that? It's Payne's gray, not a true black. I mean, not that, black usually has all colors in it. It has red, green, and yellow, or red, blue, red, blue, and yellow in it. But in this particular case, this black is a very blue color. So I'm actually going to take my brush, there it is, my brush, when I find I should move my water container so it's not right on top of you, the camera. So I'm just going to add water to this, and then I'm just going to use my fingers, and I'm just going to play, oops, and not get it all over the face. And this way I'm just kind of working, basically I'm just kind of building background with it. I'm actually going to use my baby wipe, because there's just so much of it there. Okay. I just wanted to get some of that spread out and dried up. Now I did get it onto the face here a little bit, but that's okay. But I'm going to start out with using the gray, and I'm just going to go into the top of the eye, and of the whites of the eyeball is where I'm working right now. And I'm just going to create the appearance. I'm sort of following that shading that you can see, that the drawing actually kind of came already with some shading in it. That's kind of what I'm doing, is just enhancing that shading there a bit. And then now is when, if you're going to use a brush, now would be a good time, because you can fade that out a little bit. I'm just going to use a Filbert water color brush. And it's not even wet right now. It's just, it's, completely dry. And I'm just going to kind of blend. I'm basically just taking the hard edge off of that shading that I put in. And I'll show you a close-up of this so you can see what I mean by how it's all a very soft shadow now. It's not a harsh shadow. And then I'm going to take the black that comes with it, and I'm just going to put it into the pupil area, and then I'm going to draw a line of it over top of the iris. So the colored part of the eye, completely over the top of it. So I'll show you that before I do any blending. And then I'm going to use this same brush, and I'm just going to softly brush over that, blending it out. And so I'm just kind of softening all of it and blending it. Now I went a little off. So I rinsed out the brush completely, and then I'm really trying to get it dry. And then I'm just going to try to push that color back up a little bit. That's really touchy. You might even be better off just going to another brush that you know is dry and doing that instead of trying to follow what I did there, because that, is kind of one of those practiced sort of things. All right, and then I'm also going to come into the nostrils and add some strong color. I'm using the gray, and I'm not going to be, doing any blending with that. Now here, though, I want to denote a little bit more darkness under the chin. So I'm going to follow that line that was there for the chin, and then I'm going to add a little extra coming down. So hopefully you can see that really well. And then I'm going to use a different completely dry brush to kind of just gently blend that out. Again, this is another one of those techniques that is very much a learned technique on doing it and getting the expected result. It just takes some practice, some time. Now I've got this really pretty royal blue, and I'm just going to add a little bit of this color in to some of the shadows. This one is really transparent, so I get a really nice light appearance from it. I let that one dry too much. The darker the color, it seems sometimes the faster it tends to dry, and then you have to go in ever smaller areas. I'm just going to use my finger, trying to blend with the brush. I mean, to soften edges is great, but when I'm blending, sometimes I find a brush limiting and maybe even kind of frustrating. So I tend to just go with my fingers. Goodness, I'm sniffling like a little kid and they're having their first cold. But there seems to be nothing that I can do about it because I took the wrong allergy medicine. I just got caught off guard. I didn't realize the weather had changed so drastically. And they're very weather oriented. Okay, so when it comes to painting, a face using these awesome markers, I mean, I kind of think I've given you a really good idea of, how to go about doing that. I do want to do a couple of things. I want to add some white in to the, just to the eyeballs. And the reason being that I was, I preserved the white extremely well on this particular face. if you didn't, you know, like say you painted over an area, you know, you were exuberant and you were really, you know, enjoying yourself, and you painted over an area that you kind of wish you hadn't, you can let it, you know, let it pretty much set, and then paint over it with this, and you can do the blending just like we did. You just have to remember that this can easily be completely blended off. B, it will loosen up and thus cause lifting for any of the other marker color that you put down. So if you put it over top of this and then you start blending, you're going to get a mix of whatever's down already plus the white. So use it, you know, with that kind of knowledge in mind. But I'm just going to tap in a highlight into the actual eyeball itself. And then I want to put a highlight in for the eyes, so I'm going to do it as kind of like a rectangle at the top of both eyes. And I'm going to do two, a long one and then a short one. So I'll kind of hopefully show you. This is one of those things that you don't want to overwork it, because you will be reactivating everything that is behind it. So you can see how it's not really white, it's kind of a lighter blue, and that is part and parcel for using these markers. So what I do is put that down, let it dry, or in this case I'm going to hit it with a heat gun, and then I'm actually going to go over it again with a white jelly roll pen. This is a medium size, so it's the 08. These are my favorite pens for getting a nice white mark over top of anything like these markers, because it is not water soluble once it's dry, and that means I can do 2 layers. I can do 1 layer, let it dry. The second layer will not pick up the color as long as I'm not reactivating what's under it. So I'm hopefully going to remember to blank out the sound on this, but I'm going to hit this with my heat gun and get it dry. Okay, so like I said, hopefully I'll remember to mute that in the actual video. But now I'm going to take this white gel pen, and like I said, I actually have to do this 2 times. I'm going to pull the camera down even closer, and I'm going to kind of reorient it a little. There we go. So the first time I do this, I'm going to put the color down, and I'm really almost kind of using it like paint. I know there's a lot coming out, and I know that it's, you know, right now anyway, it's kind of moving around. So I'm using that to my advantage in how I go about getting the marks down. I'm going to make sure that I haven't picked any blue up, and I'm actually going to come into this bottom lip as well, and I'm going to put that light color in. I'm also going to do a little bit just at the edge, and then I'm going to just kind of tap at that a little bit. I have to kind of be careful of what fingers have marker already on them. And then creatively, I'm just going to put a couple of little lines that would denote the little lines that you get naturally occurring in lips. And again, I'm going to tap at those, which kind of just blurs them out a little bit. It blurs that white, it kind of smushes that white around. And then I'm going to go just above the lip, and I'm going to add some brightness there on both sides, all along that ridge line of that upper lip, outside of the dark line that's already there. And that's just going to add a little touch of brightness there. And then again, I'm going to hit this with my heat gun. Okay, so hopefully I will have muted that again. And now I'm just going to add a little bit more white, being really careful not to jar that surface and then re-wet the original colors that were marker that was underneath of it. And then I'm also going to go into the eye itself, into the eye, the whites of the eye, and add some brighter white ink in there. Gel pens, if you use them, if you get, you know, a lot of practice in with them, you can get them, wiggle them around just so that you get a lot more ink out, and so it's almost more like painting. And then just for, you know, some visual interest happening, I'm actually going to just put a little triangle of brightness down here, kind of at the bottom of the iris, and just touching into the pupil a little bit, just because eyes, I think, should have a variety of lights and highlights going on in them. I think it makes eyes more beautiful and you know, more realistic. So that's it for that portion of this. Now I'm actually going to raise this back up, and again, I do this manually, so keep that in mind. It's not the most smooth transition because I do it by hand. And so then the final thing that I kind of want to do is I just want to play with the background and a little bit with the hair, and just sort of finish this out, so to speak. But the main, you know, like the main portion of what we were trying to learn here obviously has been taught. Oh, one more quick little thing I'll throw in there for you is you can take your white jelly roll and you can create a little line above the lash line. That kind of denotes that brighter line of the lid, the inner lid line that's on your eyes. And you can also do just one or two lashes, which is kind of what, as if the light was sort of reflecting up and hitting just a few of your eyelashes. I'll show you that closely. So suddenly it looks like we painted eyelashes in, even though we really didn't. We just did a couple with a white pen. So that's just like a little tip or trick that I use a lot. So as far as play, I think playing around with hair and being just kind of wild and crazy with it is probably my most favorite thing to do. So that's actually what I'm going to do here. And I'm just going to play with purples, blues, and pinks. And I'm sort of kind of making hair, maybe, or maybe I'm making background. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of both. I'm just playing, let's be honest. I'm just playing for the fun of it. And I really do love atypical, abnormal, weird hair stuff. Now this is a gel one, so I don't know how it will react. I haven't had as much time to play with these gel markers as I have, obviously, with the other Crayola markers. And I love really wacky, crazy, strange hair. I can't really explain what fascinates me so much about it. It just fascinates me. I just love it. Now I'm putting a little bit of color into her eyebrows. I thought, yeah, I do have another purple. But I'm not don't necessarily, you know, care if they're completely painted properly or not. All right, I'm going to add some neon pink into this. And because the other colors are wet, then it will do some mixing, which is awesome. And you can still see the shading here and here that I am kind of covering up at this point, but I have a plan. I'm not doing obviously as much of that color as I did with purple. I'm actually going to go into the black that isn't really black, and I'm going to kind of add some more hair-like details in with this. And this is where I said, you know, like I kind of have a plan to kind of hide that darkness that was, you know, from the shading. So now I can make, you know, more lines that sort of start to denote the actual hair. You can run these, by the way, out of ink in the end, but generally it's only temporary. And if you just kind of stop and let them sort of re-energize, or, you know, more ink to flow down into the tip, then they'll start working for you again. So that's just kind of a heads up there. And so now I'm going to switch over to that gray. And I don't want the gel gray, I want the regular gray. So now I've just kind of switched over to the gray. So I'm kind of getting a lighter color here. And that makes sense because this is the side that would be lighter based on sort of the shading that we kind of chose. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of that in here. All right, so now we've got some awesome hair going on. And I had started with kind of, you know, the grays in the background over here. So I'm actually just going to stick with that. So I'm going to take this little brush that I was using at one point, and I'm just going to kind of paint with this. Maybe. I don't have any to speak of the matte medium up here, so it's like raw paper, and it just wants to stay where I put it. Doesn't want to move around a lot. And then for this side over here, I think I'm just going to go with some really light blue, and I have this blue in the gel. And what I think would be a good idea is I'm going to turn it so that I can work over here with a little bit of ease. And I'm going to take a brush that, I've actually got a nice angled brush here. I'm going to take an angled brush that just has water, and I'm just going to pre-wet that area with a little bit of water. It's probably going to make some of that marker bleed for a minute here. But now that I kind of have it pre-wet, I'm just going to add in some color, and you can see that it kind of removes the color out of the tip of the marker. And then these markers also don't write into water well. You just have to sort of get to know the marker and, you know, what's going on with it. I've been using them for a long time, so I kind of have a feel for them already. So now I'm just going to add more water with my brush and just kind of start manipulating that all and getting it moving around. You can see pretty easily where I had medium and where I didn't have any, so where it was kind of direct to paper. But again, you know, I come back to the fact that that is something that I personally actually really like, that effect. So now I've got a really dark, kind of a royal blue. And I'm on the area that's kind of direct to paper, so I know it's not going to move around a lot. So what I'm actually going to do is I tipped my brush into water, and now I'm just going to add marker to the brush. Oh, I stuck a marker in my mouth. Sorry. It's one way to shut me up. And then I've got my paint rag, and I'm just going to create some texture by just kind of dabbing my paint rag over it, which will pick up some ink and not other ink. And then I'm just going to clean my surface up a little bit. Now, the one thing that we didn't do is we didn't use any purple in the actual face, but yet we made her hair purple. So it's up to you. You can go in and you can add some purple shading. So like I'll just, you know, to help out and show you what I mean, I just added some purple there in that really sort of darkest area where I want to shade the face. And then I'll just blend it around. And so now suddenly the face does indeed have this purple, so it won't feel quite as alien that it's just her in her hair. Because now it won't be just in her hair. It will be throughout the entire face. We'll have some of this kind of purple color. And you can even have fun and just kind of go around and add just a few sort of random areas that are just kind of accented by the fact that they have the purple in them. I'm done playing. I'm just doing so much playing now. Not because I want to, you know, that it's something you need to know, but just because I want to play. But it's hard to stop. It's so hard to just stop. And then finally, obviously, if you're working in an art journal, you want to do some journaling. If you're working more like I am on a freestanding page, you would want to go ahead and sign your work. And I generally sign and date my work. So there you go. I will do some close-ups for you. And I will take a photo so that you'll get a little still shot print that you can print out and include this cute little big-eyed girl in your journal or hang her on your wall or something like that. All right, I hope that you learned a lot, that you had a lot of fun, and I would absolutely love on Facebook or Flickr or anywhere random around the internet if you posted one of your girls or in the Facebook group. But wherever, if you do share one, if you write a blog post, whatever you do, you can just post a link in the comments of the class, and when I see the links come through, I usually go and check them. And you know, I love to see your homework, and if you want critiquing, you can email me, Christy@golfsprite.com or golfsprite@gmail.com, and I'm happy to do private critiquing, but I have to be asked to do specifically. If you want public critiquing, I'm not as comfortable doing that, not because I'm not comfortable giving feedback, but because I kind of feel like when it comes to the learning process, everyone's at a different place and they're all learning different things differently, so it's not always constructive to hear feedback on someone else's work. but I'm happy to give you feedback on your work. So I think that's it. Thanks for joining me for Mercury Mayhem, and I hope to see you in some of the other classes.